folks, Scott here with the new My Monthly Hero January 2022 kit. Again, this is in our 8x10 fancy zipper pouch. Now, for some reason, the website mentions that a trip to Paris inspired this kit with all of the locks that lovers had put on the fence, on the bridges in Paris. Of course, I recently read somewhere that they had to cut a bunch of those locks off because they were getting too heavy for the bridges. These are our dies. This is our big cover plate die that is actually a keyhole with all sorts of decorations around it. Now, there's a frame cut for that will cut out 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, so that's a full A2 card. And that is the keyhole die. I decided to try and see what this actually gives us. And this is the die cut of that keyhole cover plate die. All of those details are cut into the cardstock. Little flowers and hearts and vines and a great big keyhole right in the center. The webpage, of course, mentions this as a Valentine kit or friendship or just keeping in contact with people. Let's take a look at the rest of our dies here. We've got 1, 2, 3 frame cuts for images in our stamp set and then a fancy key die. Those are our dies with this kit. And here is our stamp set, which is a layering stamp with a big bough of greenery, this huge bough of greenery. A layering stamp, we've got 2 pieces to the branch, 2 pieces to the greenery. We've got a swing, and then 2 pieces of greenery that go up and down the strings of the swing. That's interesting. And a little stony path over here. Looks like there's a little sprigs of grass here and some butterflies, tiny butterflies there. A number of sentiments. You make me smile. You hold the key to my heart. I love you. You are treasured. XOXO. Kisses and hugs. Sending loving thoughts and a hello with a little hand-drawn heart there. That's our 6x8 stamp set. We also get some ink cubes with this kit. We get key lime fizz, green apple, and taffy reactive inks, and then a Cup of Joe dye ink. And we also get this great bag of red iridescent gems. Look at those iridescent red gems. Looks like there's 2 or 3 different sizes in here. That's everything in the My Monthly Hero January 2022 kit. Let's do some quick stamping here. I'll pull my Misty out here. So I imagine we should start with the branch first, which is kind of sized to go on an A2 card using, let's try the caramel, the Hero Arts caramel. I think this came with the sunflowers. There we go. And then we'll go with the Cup of Joe for the darker color on top of that. See how well we got that lined up. This is just adding shadows and texture to that branch. Oh, that looks really pretty nice. I don't think I'm even going to stamp that a second time. That was fairly simple. I suppose we should stamp the swing next. Well, at least there's stamp material between the strings on the swing. Let's go ahead and stamp that swing in Cup of Joe. And number 2. I'm trying to do these with the colors that are included in our kit. There's our swing hanging in our tree. Then we go to the solid stamp and fit the tree branch in and amongst all of that greenery. It looks pretty good. It seems fairly easy to line up. We'll go with Key Lime Fizz. That is the lighter color. Doesn't look like I've got a very even layer down there. Let's do that again. It looks like it's in and amongst that tree branch just perfectly. That was quite easy to line up. We'll stamp that one more time. Well, that looks nice. That lined up quite easily. Then we have the detailed leafy stamp. That, again, it looks like you just line up that branch. That looks pretty good. Pick that up, and we'll stamp this portion of the greenery with green apple ink. I happen to have a big pad of that green apple, so I'll use that instead of the ink cube. Okay, cross your fingers, see how this goes. It's such a nice green. Look at that. Well, sometimes Hero Arts layering stamps are a bit of a challenge for me, but I'm really pleased with this set. These came together very easily. Now, there's also the taffy ink in our kit. I suppose you could use the taffy on the detail greenery stamp. Maybe we'll try that on the swing greenery. Look at that. Then we have 2 greenery on the swing stamps. Let's give that a try. And we'll do that with the key lime fizz again. And then maybe we'll try the taffy on top of that for the detail on this greenery. Let's give that one more shot, one more quick one. That's twice. And then we've got the detail of that. Looks like it kind of just matches up with that first stamp. Let's give this a try in the taffy. See if we can add some flowers to all of this greenery. Okay, here we go. Look at that. We'll give that one more shot of taffy. And if you wanted to be really particular, you could wait and let each layer dry before you do the next layer on top of it. Really nice and easy to do some layering stamping with this stamp set. Of course, I'll experiment with how many different ways I can use these stamps on my 10 cards. Stay tuned. And here we have my 10 cards. Everything is on a white card base. We've got a slimline card. Looks like we also have a shaped card in there this month. Now, I wasn't thrilled with that bicolored image that I practiced these stamps on, so I went another route. I thought I'd see if I could get a little more flowers going on with this tree. I think I'm still stuck in the notion of making this a wisteria, although I'm sure that the designers didn't necessarily intend it to be used that way. So for my first card on a white card base, we have a Miss You card. I'm sorry, but nothing seems quite so forlorn and lonely to me than an empty swing. So this branch and swing are stamped with Cocoa and Cup of Joe ink. Not very much distinction between those two colors. That's the last time I used those together. The solid greenery is taffy, and the detail foliage is stamped with green apple. That's pretty interesting. It's almost starting to feel like a wisteria to me. The green apple ink got very dark on top of that pink, on top of that taffy. Now, I didn't allow the taffy much time to dry. If I had, the green apple might stay a little brighter on top. I don't know. It's worth experimenting, though. I used the matching frame dies to die cut both the swing and the tree branch. I ink blended Lemon Drop, Key Lime Fizz, and Green Apple reactive inks on a 4-inch by 5¼ inch panel of white cardstock. I sprinkled some water droplets on top for a little added texture. They really show up in the dark green here, but you can see them all the way up through that soft yellow on the top. This sentiment is from the Hero Arts Many Everyday Messages stamp set, my favorite Miss You sentiment of all time on it. I stamped that sentiment with Caramel and Cup of Joe inks from Hero Arts, and then embossed that with a little clear embossing powder. The panel is glued down to an A2 card base. The swing is glued to the back of the tree branch, and the combined die cuts are glued down with some thin foam tape. I didn't feel like any of the sentiments in this kit really embellished this image correctly, so I went with Miss You on this one. I think that Miss You stamp has gotten a lot of use lately. So Santa was actually pretty good to me this year, and I got some great new products. They're new products for me, but I think they've been on the market for years and years and years, and I'm just finally catching up. So for our next card here, we've got You Hold the Key to My Heart, with that lovely ornate keyhole cover plate die, one of the keys and one of the sentiments. So I die cut the cover frame die from some pitch black cardstock, and then I top coated that die cut with some Creative Expressions metallic gilding polish. I got a red, rich red. This one is Silver Dream. This one is Gold Treasure. These are gilding polishes. They come with a nice little foam applicator in the top. These have been around for a while, but it's the first time I've had them, and I used these, all three of these colors, with their little blending brushes on the front of this die cut. Really nice metallic shine on those. They dry in no time at all, and because it's lightly brushed on, it leaves that black kind of antiquing in all of the seams there. I die cut the key twice from more of the pitch black cardstock. I glued them together and used the gold and silver polish on top of that key. Now, I went back and forth as to what to put in the keyhole. I did have it just black, but that seemed terribly flat. So ultimately, I grabbed a piece of this is just some silver mirror cardstock behind there. I threw that back there. That seemed nice and bright and shiny. I stamped the sentiment on a scrap of black cardstock using watermark and embossing ink and embossed that with some gold embossing powder. I fussy cut all around that sentiment. I glued everything down to a white card base, glued the key in the center, and added the sentiment with some thin foam tape. Those gilding polishes are kind of stunning and really so very easy to use. Adds a real sense of antique metal to this cover plate die. And the hearts, I think the hearts in the die cut are certainly enough to carry this sentiment. You hold the key to my heart. So let's get back to those layering stamp sets. Card number 3, we've got an I Love You card with a double stamping of that great branch in colors of the kit. These branches are stamped in Hero Art Sandstone ink, and the detail branch is stamped in Cup of Joe. That gave us some good detail, some nice distinction in those branches. The solid foliage is stamped in Lime Green Fizz. The detail foliage is stamped in Green Apple. I stamped this all on an A2 card panel using my MISTI, and I just rotated the cardstock 90 degrees to stamp the branch in the same spot on the top and the bottom. I thought they came together very nicely. I stamped the butterflies in some taffy ink and added a little detail with a black Pigma Micron pen. I ink blended the taffy ink on the edges of that panel and stamped the sentiment with green apple ink, and then I also did emboss that with some clear embossing powder as well. I die cut the panel with a rounded infinity rectangle die and glued it flat to my A2 card base. A few of the iridescent red gems highlight the sentiment here. This feels like a great big green hug. I love you. I was also the proud recipient of a bunch of these Sizzix texture rolls. That's a really kind of a thick, kind of a leathery paper. It's made to be able to be washed and crinkled and distressed, and it won't tear. You cannot tear it, but it will die cut. If I grabbed a piece of the rose gold for this next card, and we have You Are Treasured card with the lovely rose gold texture roll in the background there. And I cut a piece of that rose gold texture roll to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. I crumpled it up, I twisted it up, I rolled it around. I don't think I really got it wet, but I gave it as much crunch and crinkle and smash as I possibly could. Then I spread it out flat and I ran it through my die cut machine just to flatten it all out. And then I ran it through again with this is a We Are Memory Keepers. This was their next level heart embossing folder. These are nice little 3-dimensional hearts. I don't think this is available anymore. I love this. This is back in the early days of the dimensional embossing folders. And I love the puffy hearts that it gives us in the background. That texture roll holds an embossing really, really nicely. It took the embossing, even though I had crumpled it all up, and it really kind of looks like a rose gold leather there. I added a thin black mat behind that and glued both down to an A2 card base. I die cut the keyhole along with the key in the center from pitch black cardstock. I added some gilding polish to the key and the heart and then inlaid those back into the keyhole. I die cut another keyhole and trimmed away the keyhole frame. That's one of the nice things about that keyhole die. While the die will cut out the inside of that, it leaves a frame around the outside, and you can cut that frame away quite easily. So that's what I did. I cut another one of those cover plate dies from some plain rose gold cardstock. I think that's Tim Holtz rose gold, and trimmed the keyhole frame away from that die cut and then inlaid the keyhole with that. I made sure those were all together, and then I added them to my card front with some thin foam tape. The sentiment is stamped on more black cardstock and embossed with silver embossing powder. Nice little shine on that. It matches our key. I trimmed it down to size and mounted it to the card front with some foam tape. I thought that this was a really nice way to illustrate this sentiment. You are treasured. I treasure all of you. I have been trying to remember to do some slimline cards, whether they're regular or mini slimlines, with my 10 card kits. And I thought this was a fun way to use this kit for a slimline card this month. And we have a Be Fearless card with this really long rope swing. This is a standard 3.5 by 8.5 inch slimline card. I cut a panel of white cardstock to 3 inches by 8 inches and ink blended the background with key lime fizz, green apple ink, and then splash reactive ink for the sky. I stamped the branch with sandstone and caramel ink, not quite as much contrast as the Cup of Joe gives us, but that's nice for a bit of an autumnal look here. The foliage is stamped with lemon drop ink for the background and creamsicle ink for the detail stamp on top. The falling petals are a stamp from the My Monthly Hero March 2020 kit. This is the March kit, the little falling petals here and there. They went perfectly along with this tree feature, and I love using it as autumn leaves. I think that works very nice. No green at all in that tree. I stamped the stones with some hickory smoke distress oxide ink. I added a little detail with black soot distress oxide ink, and I drew in a touch of a shadow under each little rock there with a light gray Zig watercolor marker. I also stamped the tufts of grass on the ground there as well. I masked out the seat of the swing and stamped it with Cup of Joe ink, and then drew in the rope lines with a brown Pigma Micron pen and the aid, of course, of a T-square. So they were nice and straight and square to the card. I printed this sentiment on that front panel then using my Silhouette software and the Shorelines script bold font. I tell you, the thought of swinging on a long swing like this kind of gives me a little touch of vertigo. This sentiment seemed like the perfect fit. A very unique encouragement card. So Hero Arts encouraged us to make some Valentines with this kit. There's an I love you sentiment and XOXO. So I thought I'd take it just one step further and try a heart-shaped card this month. So we have a I love you XOXO with that lovely greenery on top of the heart. This came out very nicely. Very pleased with that. The branches are sandstone and caramel ink. The foliage is lemon drop and green apple. I did add extra tendrils from the rope swing on the sides here, making it a little bit more wisteria-like. Now, I did mask off this end of the stamp. So this is the right end of the stamp, and this is the left end of the stamp. And I just masked off the end of that branch to cut it off a little short there, makes it kind of look like it disappears into the foliage. And then, of course, there was some missing foliage in the center here, so I just used the inks and one of these little micro applicators to fill in the inks around that masking there. I thought it all came together quite nicely. I stamped the sentiment with Fruit Punch reactive ink and embossed that with some clear embossing powder. I also added a little blue to the sky using my Pebbles chalk palette. This is an old chalk palette. I love using little chalks like this for backgrounds when you've already stamped something and don't want to have to spend too much time adding a little color to the background. Those chalks go on very softly and hardly interrupt the stamped inking whatsoever. Finally, I die cut the stamped panel with the largest Hero Arts nesting infinity heart die. The largest one, it's not quite 4 1/4 inches tall. So I took the same die to a folded A2 card base, and I cut that from the A2 card base, leaving just the top little part of the hearts over the edge so it didn't cut our seam there. I then did also cut the tip off of the back of the heart so that the whole card would stand up on its point. So when I glued the inked and die cut heart to the card base, it covers up the flat edges on the tops of the heart there. I don't do a lot of specifically shaped cards, and this one came out so nicely. I'm very pleased. My biggest gig on this card was finding a die cut for all these little sparkly flowers. I dug around and dug around. I didn't have any dies in my stash that were small enough, and even the smallest heart in the Infinity Heart dies was just a little too big to actually look like it went with these trees. So I dug around, I dug around. I finally found this American Crafts Knockout Border Punch that has little bitty hearts on it, just the right size. I punched out a bunch of those little bitty hearts from some red glitter cardstock and then glued those all liberally all over our trees here. They're all pointing down, so they kind of look like those hanging flowers. Again, here we go, more wisteria, I guess. I even trimmed a couple of those little hearts down so that they looked like they were peeking out from behind the branch. I really like this. The sentiments work perfectly well, snuggled up together like that. I love you, XOXO. And the flowers add just the right pop of color and sparkle. Shaped cards are always fun. Happy Valentine's Day. So I do try to use all of the stamps in our stamped kit with my 10 cards. So there was the one sentiment, "You make me smile," that I was like, what's the one thing that always makes me smile? And that's a shaker card. Of course. I think everybody smiles when they get a shaker card in the mail. You make me smile. I die cut the cover plate die from a 4 1/4 inch by 5 1/2 inch piece of pitch black cardstock. And then I used my Yasutomo pearlescent watercolors to color this in. These are extremely inexpensive. I think this whole palette is like less than $10. I'll have a link to this on my website if you're interested in getting some. And these pearlescent watercolors work really, really well. They give us a lot of color on top of this black cardstock. Very folk art, it feels to me. I think that's partly because of the red and the green, but the gold worked very well on that black cardstock as well. So I stamped and embossed the sentiment using some embossing and watermark ink and, of course, gold embossing powder. And I just glued that down to a white card base. I added a piece of acetate behind the keyhole, added double layer of foam tape around the hole and around the edges of our die cut, and then added a bunch of sequins inside. This is an old Love from Lizzie sequin mix, I believe, but those colors seem to work very well with the colors of my card. You make me smile. I was thinking, why do we all like a shaker card? I think it's because we're conditioned to like rattlers from an early age. Rattle, rattle, rattle. You make me smile. If I make you smile, take a moment there to give me a thumbs up. Click that thumbs up at the top. That'll bring this video to the attention of more like-minded people. Thank you. Okay, I have used this pun before in one form or another, but it's been a number of years, and I just couldn't resist with a kit like this. So for our next card, on a white card base, we've got, I may be a little dorky, but I like you a lot. Never fails to make me giggle. I may be a little dorky, but I like you a lot. I die cut this key 2 times from some distressed silver Sizzix texture roll. Again, this is that texture roll stuff. I gave this as much distress as I possibly could and cut a couple of those keys from that silver texture roll. I glued both of those die cuts together, and I tell you, that really almost looks like a metallic key there. Now, this background is an image file that I had in my image file, the little keys all over the place. I went into my Silhouette software and I printed that with this sentiment. This sentiment is, of course, the Brady Bunch remastered font. I'll make these available on my website if you'd like to grab a copy of those. And I did the inside the same with just a little frame of those keys around that. I took the printed piece and added a little black mat behind that, glued those flat down to my white card base. I then die cut a little square of black, pitch black cardstock with a Lawn Fawn stitched rectangle die, added that to the card front with some foam tape, glued my silver key on the top of that at a jaunty angle. I may be a little dorky, but I like you a lot. There's a great, fun, tongue-in-cheek Valentine for you. Now, I have to admit that I have mixed feelings about this cover plate die. I think it's gorgeous, but the concept of looking through a keyhole is extremely foreign to me. Let's say that. I couldn't help but feel guilty looking through the keyhole at anybody. It makes me feel like I'm eavesdropping on someone or something, watching something that I shouldn't see. But, you know, I did keep imagining the possibility of looking through a keyhole and seeing the cosmos. So for our next card here, ooh, look, we've got a top folding card here. I have Seek and You Shall Find with the cosmos. There you go. I really like this quite a bit. When I was thinking of seeing the cosmos through the keyhole, I reached for these. I have these washi tapes from Alta New. I believe this one is called Galaxy, just a straight Galaxy, and the other one is called a Watercolor Nebula. Yes, that's the Watercolor Nebula washi tape. Now, I was going back and forth trying to decide which one of these to use inside the keyhole when I decided that why not use both? That actually feels kind of like the opening credits to The Twilight Zone with that keyhole floating. Although I think that keyhole had an eyeball in it, didn't it? So I used the Galaxy washi tape to cover the front of an A2 card base. I covered a scrap of white cardstock with the Watercolor Nebula washi tape and die cut the keyhole from that. I went back and forth deciding what color to use for the frames on this card, and I ultimately settled on white just because it matched all the stars on the washi tape. Nice and clean, nice and bright. I die cut 2 of these keyhole frames and glued those together. I cut 2 frames for the outside of the card, again from my Lawn Fawn stitched rectangle dies. I printed this sentiment on a scrap of cardstock using that's the Copper Plate Gothic Light. I'll have links to all of these fonts on my website as well if you'd like to join in on the fun. I printed that up on a scrap of white cardstock. I die cut that with a small Everyday Messages banner die from Lawn Fawn. I cut a couple of those and glued those together, added those to the front of the card base. Everything's flat on the card, but there's a little dimension because there's a couple of pieces making up each frame. Seek and You Shall Find. Talk about encouragement. So here we are, almost done, and I actually haven't used the layering stamps and the keyhole die together on any cards yet. So I had this one idea. I thought we might be able to make a little fun fold card here. So for my last card, oh, there we go. We've got those trees in the keyhole. And this actually opens like this to give us ascending loving thoughts. A nice little gatefold, but interlocking. It actually holds itself closed like that because of the interlocking nature of that card. So I die cut the cover plate die from some of my new gold Sizzix texture roll and covered the front with VersaFine Onyx Black ink. I let that dry for a little bit and then just took a soft cloth in and started buffing away that black ink from the top of that cardstock, that texture roll. And gosh, I think this looks the most like metal of all of my other attempts here with just using some black ink on top of that texture roll. Really looks like an antique piece of metal. I die cut the keyhole shape from a scrap of white cardstock, and I ink blended some of the splash ink for the background. I stamped the branch a couple of times using sandstone and caramel ink. I stamped the foliage with lemon drop and fruit punch reactive inks. I added a few floating leaves around here as well using the stamp from the March 2020 kit. And I stamped the birds. Those are from the My Monthly Hero July 2019 kit. That's a really nice, inviting view through that keyhole. Here's a quick little look at how I assembled the card. I actually remembered to turn on the camera and thought you might be interested in seeing how I put this card together. So let's try assembling this card together here. So here we have a gatefold card base. This is 5.5 inches tall, 8.5 inches long. These are scored etcher gatefold marks, which is 2 1/8 and 6 3/8. That's where they're scored, folded in together. I went ahead and stamped the sentiment on the inside using some VersaFine Onyx Black ink. And I did go ahead and ink blend some of the splash reactive ink on the left side of this. This is where this part is going to attach. So I didn't want that plain white behind there. Then I also have a backer card for that. Now it's cut a little bit bigger. So I cut out the ring of the keyhole to make this, because I figured if the keyhole was going to pop into the keyhole, that it might help if the edges of this were not really thick. That was my thinking behind that. So my backer piece does not have that inner line of the keyhole. So let's try putting this together. I use my multimedia mat just because I want this to really, really stick. Okay, let's get that on the front half of our card. Line the edges up here. I'm using liquid glue, so I have plenty of room to wiggle around. That looks like it's covering the whole of our card front. I'm going to let that dry just a little bit, and then we're going to put this backer piece on the other side. Now you can see here that if we're on the left side of this fold, that it pushes our card to the left just a little bit. So I want to trim off a 1/16 of an inch or something from this side of the card. There you go. Now that edge matches up to the edge of our keyhole. So that's what we want to glue down next. And we will glue this entire piece. And now we'll add this to the back. And this will give some weight to that texture roll paper. Give that a fold. That folds nicely. I'm going to let that dry for just a little bit here. Give it a nice little massage. Now, theoretically, I should be able to glue my keyhole picture on the left side here. Okay, I'm going to pop this in here and open it up. I'm going to put glue on this side. A decent amount, but not so much that it's going to come gushing out. And then let's close it and say a quick prayer and let this dry. We're doing this together. I have not tried this before. That's what we want. That right there. Oh, that's not too bad. And there we have interlocking gatefold card, sending loving thoughts. I tell you, I grew to like these layering stamps more and more as I worked with them. And this giant keyhole cover plate is certainly unique and quite ornate. Look at those. There's my 10 cards featuring the My Monthly Hero January 2022 kit. I think we've got a pretty good variety of cards this month. I did manage to use every stamp in the stamp set except for the hello right here. I got all of the other sentiments, the butterflies, the stones, little tufts of grass. I just missed out on that one hello sentiment. And that cover plate die gives us a wide range of uses. I'm very thrilled that the inside frame of that keyhole is easy to cut away from that die. That fancy key die is terrific. And these layering stamps can be used in a variety of ways. I really like them stamped in more than just green. I think the pink flowers are really nice. And I think that layering stamp works really well with autumnal colors. There's lots of experiments to be done with that. Surprisingly, this kit is still available at Hero Arts. If I've managed to catch your eye or spark your own imagination, I'd suggest grabbing a kit for yourself. When you do go shopping at Hero Arts, please use my links in the description down below. It helps support this channel. It's always supremely appreciated. Thank you so very much for sharing some time with me today. I'm always thrilled to hear from you. Let me know what your favorite cards are. I hope I provided you with a little inspiration and maybe a few smiles. Please remember to like me, list me, pin me, post me, share me with all your crafty friends. Don't run with scissors. I send you and yours my best wishes for a healthy, harmonious new year featuring lots of love and laughs. And as always, happy crafting. For more detailed information, better pictures, and product links, please visit my website at cardcutups.com.